In this session, I'm going to talk about the fixed income securities and what are the different kinds of R packages as well as the various important functions associated with different R packages which can help us in solving various or understanding various topics associated with fixed income securities. So as a broad agenda, we'll look at what are the fixed income securities, then how do we measure the market risk that is associated with various fixed income securities. So here is where we'll talk about the different techniques to measure the market risk. We'll be covering duration, we'll be covering convexity. Now here let me tell you, if I am doing the theoretical way of understanding all these topics, then there are formulae and there are some kind of calculations that we may have to do. But thanks to the different kinds of packages that are available in R, all these things we are restricting ourselves only to the interpretations. The computations are typically taken care by the different tools, different formulas of R. So that's where we'll see. First of all, we'll understand the various measures of market risk, and then we'll be seeing how do we implement these things in R. So that's one part. Coming to the next part, we look at a fixed income portfolio. If at all I have invested in various fixed income securities. So there is some amount of risk associated with this entire portfolio. Now, how do I really immunize it? First of all, what is meant by immunization and how do I really immunize this portfolio? Right? If the interest rates changes, how do I make sure that my portfolio really does not lose heavily? Right? So we'll be dealing with a few of the mechanisms for that. But the major part towards the end is in terms of if I have a convertible bond, a bond which can be converted into shares. If I have a convertible bond, how do I really do the pricing for that particular bond? So these are the various things we are going to cover in detail as a part of this particular session. So let's get it. Key objective of fixed income portfolio management. When I talk about portfolio management, my intention is to reduce the risk, right? And this kind of a portfolio I am creating only with fixed income securities, which means I am not using the stocks in this portfolio. I am not using any other commodities or currencies or anything. It's only the fixed income securities, which are the bonds, are being used as a part of the creation of the portfolio. So I am creating a portfolio containing only the fixed income securities. So fixed income securities, different kinds of securities will have different amount of risks. The risk is mostly associated with their credit ratings. So we have different kinds of risks and accordingly we have different kinds of returns that they are providing. Now, as a part of the fixed income portfolio management, my intention is to allocate the funds to various fixed income securities. So here, just like any other portfolio management objective, I want to maximize my return and I want to minimize my risk. I want the investment or the allocation of funds in such a way that the overall expected return should be higher and the risk should be as low as possible. And this is where I define my investment objectives, and based on the investment objectives, the allocation to the various funds happen accordingly. Now, coming to the process of doing this fixed income portfolio management, the yield curve, there is a dynamic modeling that is required. When I am talking about the yield curve, how the interest rates of different periods I'm talking about the 6-month interest rate, 3 months interest rate, 1 year interest rate, different kinds of interest rates across time, how they keep changing, right? Is it a upward sloping or downward sloping or flat? What is the kind of a shape of the yield curve? How the yield curve is changing with respect to time? All these things require a dynamic modeling. Then, with respect to many of the fixed income securities, there is a possibility of a prepayment. Two major forms of fixed income securities, if I see, one, the loans. There could be a early payment of the loans. So that comes under the prepayment behavior. And when I talk about the bonds, we have callable bonds where the prepayment can very well happen. So there is a possibility of a prepayment behavior associated with these fixed income securities. So I need to have models which can effectively handle this prepayment behavior. And the third important aspect, which is a significant thing with respect to many fixed income securities, is the default. So there is a possibility that the party who has borrowed might default on the transaction. So these are the three key aspects. If I am talking about a very simple fixed income security, then a lot of things are straightforward. But once I start understanding that the yield curve is going to change drastically or dynamically with time, fixed income securities are exposed more and more to prepayment behaviors, so that needs to be handled effectively. And default is another key aspect that goes into many of the fixed income securities. So we need to have a process on how to really model all these aspects. Then coming to the different kinds of tools, we use the time series analysis heavily. Different aspects of the time series analysis comes into picture. Stochastic processes, especially when I have to model the prepayment behavior, because there's a lot of randomness on when people are going to prepay, when people are going to default, on what kind of process. So there is something more associated to the default behaviors associated with the prepayment behavior. So we treat those kind of processes as stochastic processes and try to handle them. Then optimization comes up because we want to maximize the expected returns while trying to minimize the risk that is associated with the investment. So this is where we try to use different kinds of tools for doing a effective fixed income portfolio management. Now coming to the various risks, we have already talked about two major risks, one being the credit risk, two being the market risk. When it comes to credit risk, where there is a possibility of a default, so major activities that come in, there could be a possibility of a default, there could be a downgrading of that security, which could also cause a kind of loss on the security. So when I have to reduce my credit risk, I'll handle only those securities which have a predetermined default risk, which is like minimum credit rating. The default risk is more and more associated with the credit rating. So I'll try to select those kind of securities which have a minimum credit rating, so that I won't face a loss beyond a particular point while investing in those securities. Similarly, I would be choosing proper liquidity characteristics so that the volumes, the buy and sell volumes are not so lesser. I should be able to sell my security at a price when I wish. I should be able to buy the security at a specific price when I wish. I should not really get into a situation that I am forced to sell it at a much lesser price because of non-adequate market available for that particular product. Similarly, in a fixed income security, the other problem, other risk majorly is market risk, wherein the change in the market values could result in a kind of fall in the value of the portfolio. So probably there could be a change in the interest rates which could impact the value of the portfolio. So some kind of market variables which could impact the value of the portfolio. So this is where we use certain techniques. We use duration, we'll talk about them, modified duration, keynote duration, factor duration, different kinds of durations come into picture, which actually play a role in terms of understanding the market risk associated with the security. So now our focus in this session will be primarily on the market risk aspect of the fixed income security. So here we are not dealing with the credit risk aspect, we are more focusing on the market risk aspects of the fixed income security. First of all, whenever we talk about the price of a fixed income security or the value of any fixed income security, we are talking about the present value of the expected future cash flows, right? Present value of the expected future cash flow. Now, what are the future cash flows in case of bonds or any fixed income security? There could be some kind of coupons which are paid at regular intervals of time, and there is a kind of a redemption amount that is paid on maturity. So we have different cash flows that are expected from the bond at different points in time. So this is where we are talking of different cash flows, CF1, CF2, CF3 up to CFT, different cash flows at different time periods. We are discounting them with 1 plus YT to the power T, whatever is the interest rate at each of the periods. We are talking about a different interest rate for each of the period. So that particular periodic interest rate is what we are using for the discounting purposes. So this is where we are talking of T being the time until maturity. We are talking about the cash flows at each of the points from 0 to time period T, and Y is the kind of a discount rate we are using for discounting the cash flow of that particular period. Now, at any point in time, we see that as the bond is coming closer and closer to maturity, we see that the market price of the bond will converge to its par value. So today the market price and the par value could be much different for a security which is expiring in 2020. But the moment I come closer to 2020, I see that the market value of the bond should be more or less similar to the par value of that particular bond. That's something that we can clearly see in case of fixed income securities. So there is a change in the price which is expected in that case, because the market price, no matter what happens, the market price, because it's a discounted value of the future expected cash flows, it is going to converge, and the cash flows are typically known in advance, especially the coupons and the redemption amount, face values. So because they are known in advance, and because of the discounting changing at every period, we see that the market price of the bond is coming closer and closer to its par value as we are approaching the time to maturity, which means the change in the price, there is some portion, the price is changing, there is some portion of that change which is expected, and there is some portion which is unexpected. So whatever is that portion which is expected, which is happening because of the time to maturity coming closer and closer, we don't consider that part as a risk. But anything that is a change that is occurring because of the change in the interest rate risk, right? The interest rate change. So which means if the interest rates are falling, it might so happen that whatever is the intermediate cash flow that I am going to get, I may have to reinvest it at a much lower rate, right? In that case, I call it as a risk. The interest rates fall, and because of that falling interest rate, whatever the cash flow that I receive intermediately, I may be forced to reinvest it at a much lesser rate. So that will reduce the overall value of my portfolio. And similarly, the liquidation. If I want to sell off my asset today, right, if I am able to sell it at the current market price, then there is no liquidity issue. But because there are no buyers to it, I may be forced to sell my product at a much lesser price than the market price. In that case, I am exposed more to liquidity risk. So all these things, especially something to do with unexpected price changes caused because of interest rate changes, or even because of the liquidity related issues, they are going to impact the market price of the bond, and that is what is contributing to the market risk. Now, whenever we are talking about a market risk, we are looking at one, the price of the bond, right? In terms of the price of the bond and its yield to maturity, we are typically trying to come out with the market risk associated with the bond. Now, percentage change of price. If the yield is changing by some y amount, some small change in the yield, right? A small change in the yield. So there is a change in the price, and that change in the price is typically coming because of by this kind of an equation. So dp by dy times delta y. Let's say the interest rate change is delta y. We are looking at the sensitivity of the price with respect to the interest rate. So we are looking at the first order, the second order, and so on. So the first order dp by dy, the change is the rate of change in the price for a change in the yield. That is what we are calling as the duration. So we are getting the word duration, which is talking about the percentage change in the price caused by a percentage change in the yield. So overall percentage change in the price, we can take it as minus duration times delta y plus half convexity times delta y square. This is what is the kind of relationship, especially if I ignore the upward, the higher order movements here. I can say delta p by p. Now look at it here. If I do it as delta p by p, it is coming out as, if I am looking at delta p by p, this is coming out as minus d by 1 plus y times delta y plus half convexity times delta y square. That is what is coming out as delta p by p. So this is where we can very well find out minus d by 1 plus y times the delta y plus half convexity times delta y square. So this is where we can narrow down on the duration. The duration is coming out as minus 1 by p times dp by dy times 1 plus y, because we have got this as minus d star is nothing but d by 1 plus y. So here when I substitute in terms of d star, I can put it as d by 1 plus y. So from there I will get my duration d, which works out as dp into 1 plus y, dp by dy times 1 plus y multiplied by minus 1 by p, which actually works out to, this is the present value of the future cash flows, right? Present value of the future cash flows, multiply them with their time period divided by the overall price. So each cash flow, so if you are looking at this method, the duration wise, first find the present value of each cash flow, multiply it with the time period in which you are receiving that particular cash flow, and divide it by the overall price. That is what will give you the duration of the portfolio. So when you are using R, we all need to know that the duration is a measure of market risk of a particular fixed income security. The higher is the duration, the higher is the market risk. But typically if I am looking at, it's nothing but it's the present value of each cash flow multiplied by its time in which we are getting the we are getting that particular cash flow divided by the price. Similarly, when I am looking at convexity, which is another measure of finding the market risk associated with a fixed income security, it comes out as 1 by P times D squared P by dy squared, and which is like you are discounting the you're taking the derivative of the price equation twice, so which works out to 1 by P times 1 by 1 plus y squared, the cash flows at time t times t squared plus t by 1 plus y to the power t. So okay, this is the kind of a formula that is associated to find the convexity. So in short, duration and convexity. So duration talks about by how much the price of the bond is changing if the yield is changing by some small percentage. But how much time, by what extent the duration itself is sensitive to the change in yield. That is what is being measured by convexity. So that's where convexity is a second order term. So we take both the duration and the convexity to really come out with understanding what would be the change in the price of the bond if the yield changes by some percentage. So as a part of our R programming, we need to try to find out both the duration as well as convexity of the bond, so that it helps us to really assess and understand how much will be the change in the price of the bond corresponding to a change in the yield. So this is where we'll go ahead in terms of doing the implementation in R. All these things will go ahead in terms of implementation using R. For that, I am taking a small example. I am taking a bond whose maturity is 10 years, par value is 100, which is the face value of the bond is 100, which means this is a 10-year bond. At the end of 10 years, 100 would be paid. Annual coupon 8% paid semi-annually. So every 6 months, 4%, right? 8% paid semi-annually. So 4% of the face value. 4 is the amount that is paid every 6 months. So every 6 months, this particular bond will pay a cash flow of 4 rupees, right? CF1 to CF19, because this is a 10-year one. 19 semi-annuals, I get 4 each, and in the 20th one, along with the 4, I also will get my redemption, which is the par value, which is 100. So in the 20th cash flow, I will get 104. Okay, the yield curve is flat at 10%. So throughout this entire period, the discounting rate that I am using, Y1 is also 10%, Y2 is 10%, up to the 20 years period, the yield is 10% itself. Now, for this kind of a bond, I really want to do various calculations. So these are the typical aspects of any kind of a bond. So if I really want to assess the various things that I can do with this particular bond, this is where I'll take the help of a guide package. Right, I'll use the guide package of R, which is nothing but a GUI for derivatives in R. So let me open this R. We will simply so if at all there is, it's already installed, fair enough, let me try loading this, but if it is not there, you have to install the package. So guide is a package which contains a lot of things which I can do with the bonds, and various derivatives also I can still use the guide package. Right, just see what it contains. So I'll just do a simple guide. So this is the package which is a lot of which has a lot of user interface kind of stuff. So a lot of menu items. There are a lot of things associated with the forwards. There are a lot of things associated with the futures, options, swaps. There's a lot associated with the stochastic processes, right? Where we talk about the Brownian motion, arithmetic Brownian, geometric Brownian. We can compute the value at risk using the same. and for bonds also there are many things that are there, and these are all quite quick to use, user interface driven kind of stuff. So here I can very well find out the fair value of the bond. What should be the price of this particular bond? Right, so we are talking about a guide package which is having a lot of financial calculators and interactive plots. So let's go to using the bonds here. So let's say I want to price this particular bond. So it's a kind of a user interface now. Okay, what is the face value of the bond, which is the par value? Right, I am talking about the par value of the bond is 100. The coupon is 8% per annum. The discount rate is 10%. Maturity is 10 years. I have the coupon payment happening semi-annually. It's half yearly. And what is the frequency of discount rate? We have taken it as a continuous compounding. So this is the kind of a continuous compounding frequency that we have brought. So it is telling me, my calculation is telling me that 861.04 is the price of the bond. So for this I am typically finding out the price of my bond, which comes out to 806. Why is it coming 861? Okay, so the face value is 100, coupon is 8% per annum, discount rate is this, maturity is this, semi-annual and continuous. I get the price as 86.1. So at this moment, this particular bond is having a price of 86.1. Now I want to look at the relationship between price and yield. So let me see the relationship between price and yield for it. So I'll go to the bond, price and yield plot. Okay, so you could see for this kind of a bond which is having a coupon of 8, maturity of 10, right, a coupon of 8 and maturity of 10, this is the kind of price yield relationship. Now I could decrease the coupon. If the coupon is decreasing, I could see that this is becoming more and more steeper. If I increase the coupon up to 20, I could see that it's becoming more and more flatter. Now the same thing, let me keep the coupon somewhere in the middle at, let's say, at around 8%. Now increase the maturity. As the maturity of the bond is increasing, right, we have increased up to 22 versus you decrease the maturity. So if the maturity is 1, you are seeing more and more of a straight line, but as the maturity is increasing, the same thing is getting translated into a curve. And depending on the coupon frequency also, if it is becoming more and more semi-annual versus annual, you will find some small change occurring. So this is the kind of a price yield relationship which we observe. So we really need to understand the kind of relationship existing between the price and yield. Similarly, look at the maturity, right? The discount rate, as it keeps increasing, you see that if the discount rate is more and more, if the discount rate is right, if the discount rate is more and more, we are seeing that the graph is becoming more and more steeper, more and more curve is increasing, the curvature is increasing. But now if you see here, if the discount rate is going more than the coupon, we could see that the price of the bond is showing a kind of convex. But on the other side, the shape of it is changing Though it's convex, the shape of it is changing the other way because it is converging. Now it is the kind of a premium bond. So whereas on the other side you see that it is more and more of a discounted kind of a bond. So you could see the relationship between the coupon and the discount rate. Then if I look at the duration for this bond, which is a measure of risk, measure of interest rate risk, I see the face value of it is 100. All these things, I look at the semi-annual kind of a coupon payment, continuous, and there are two kinds of durations that we can look at. One is the Macaulay duration and the other one is modified duration, which is nothing but the Macaulay duration. If I am talking about modified duration, it is the Macaulay duration divided by 1 plus y. And Macaulay duration comes out as each of the cash flows multiplied by the time period and divide the entire thing by the price. This comes as the Macaulay duration divided by 1 plus y. I get the modified duration. So that is what we are trying to compute here. The Macaulay duration works out to 6.81, but if I go for a modified duration, it is 6.81 divided by 1 plus that y part. So that's where the modified duration works out to 6.49. So this is one thing that we can use for comparison. So the duration is 6.81 and modified duration is 6.49. So we have computed the Macaulay as well as the modified duration of the bond. Then similarly, if I want to do the computation of the convexity of the bond also, it works out to be the same. Right, I have a semi-annual coupon, all these things. So the convexity of the bond is working out to 58.51. So convexity is 58.51. So now it means if I really have to find out if the yield changes by some delta y, right? Now I'll apply this formula. If the yield changes by delta y, then I can talk about the percentage change in the price. I'll take the duration, which is minus 6.81 times delta y. Let's say the change in the interest rate is 0.1%, right? So if the change in the interest rates is 0.1%, I'll take this plus half times convexity is some 58.51 times 0.1 percentage square. This is what will give me what is the kind of a percentage change in price I can expect for this particular bond if the yield is changing by 0.1%, increased by 0.1%. The same logic I can go in terms of computing the change in the yield for even if there is a fall in the kind of fall in the interest rates as well. So this is a typical way where I can use the package. So I can get computation of the convexity. So I also want to see how the duration changes with the yield, coupon rates, maturity. We have different other functions to work on, right? We could see in case of bonds how the duration is changing with maturity. Now you could see this is a graph between maturity and duration, right? If the coupon is increasing, the duration is decreasing, right? Coupon is increasing, the duration is decreasing. Okay. Similarly, if the discount rate is increasing, the coupon is decreasing. We could clearly see if the discount rate is increasing, the present value is coming down. So that's where the duration is also coming down for us. After a certain point, we see that the duration has been increased, but after the certain time, it is going much lesser and lesser. If the coupon is coming even more lesser, if the coupon is almost zero, we see it's a kind of a straight line kind of a relation. The higher is the coupon, we see it is becoming more and more lesser and lesser because large portion of the amount is received in the initial periods itself. So we see that the duration is typically coming down. So these kind of relationships we need to be comfortable. Duration versus the yield. So yield, as the interest rates are increasing, right, which is the discount rate. Now if the coupon is increased, if the coupon is increasing, duration is, you could see that the coupon is increasing, we could see that the duration is, if the coupon is lesser, the duration is more. But if the coupon is increasing, the duration is coming down. Similarly, if the maturity is increasing, the duration is going down. If the maturity is increasing, right, you see the maturity is decreasing, you see that the duration is going up. So this is the kind of a relationship we could see with respect to duration and the yield. You can play around duration versus the coupon. If the discount rate is increasing, you could see that the duration is coming down. Duration is, if the discount rate is decreasing, the duration is going up. So this kind of thing, all lying with that present value of the future cash flows kind of a fundamental itself, we could see whether the duration is going up, going down. So all these kinds of relationships of duration, convexity, we could very well see with this interactive workaround of this particular guide package. Now coming to the next aspect, which is relating to the portfolio duration or portfolio convex. This is for one individual security. If I want to look at the entire portfolio duration or portfolio convexity, we are simply taking the weighted average of the portfolio's individual duration or convexity. So this is one major tool, guide. Probably there are a few more packages like market sim and term structure, which I would be covering slightly later. But here, as far as this particular topic is concerned, where I would like to assess the duration, convexity of a bond or a portfolio, the guide is a much better package. Then, the next thing we'll look at here is immunization of the fixed income portfolio. When I say immunization, it is majorly talking about the value of the portfolio being unaffected by the interest rate changes. So even if the interest rate changes by some amount, the portfolio's value does not change or will not lose too much on the value of the portfolio. So duration is treated as one of the good measures of the interest rate sensitivity, which is used to immunize the portfolios. But a few things that we really need to keep in mind when we are using duration for immunizing portfolios is it assumes a flat yield curve, means the yield curve does not keep changing across with time. The interest rates are constant over a period of time, and a very small shift in the yield curve. Very parallel shift and a small parallel shift in the yield curve, which means if the interest rates of 2 years changes by some amount x, we see that the 5-year interest rate also changes by the same amount x, and 10-year interest rate also changes by the same amount x. That is what we are talking of, a parallel shift in the yield curve. So duration can be used only for that kind of a purpose, and theoretically we talk about two different kinds of immunization strategies. One being the net worth immunization strategy. We are not going to implement this in R, but just to understand, I assume that the portfolio manager expects the interest rates to increase in the future. So the present value of all the fixed income securities are going to fall. So the value of the bond instruments is going to be much lesser. In that case, the main strategy is to set the duration of the portfolio to 0. Right? The major thing which any portfolio manager will try to work around is set the duration of the portfolio 0 by getting into a forward agreement or an interest rate swap. So overall duration of the portfolio comes to 0. Right? Let's assume that the portfolio's duration is some 3. Now you get into a kind of a forward rate agreement whose duration is working out to -3. So that both of them as a portfolio will reduce the portfolio duration to 0. So you are actually altering the portfolio duration and we are not liquidating the portfolio at all. That is what we do as a part of the net worth immunization strategy. In some cases, I don't want the portfolio duration to be 0, but I want to set it more or less similar to that of some benchmark. So I'll find out the duration of the benchmark and set the duration of the portfolio relative to that of the benchmark. So if the anticipated movements happen in reality, my portfolio is going to outperform the benchmark, otherwise it will underperform the benchmark. The same thing can be done even with the equities kind of securities as well. So this is what we are calling as an immunization strategy. If at all there is a small change in interest rates also, with this immunization strategy we don't find the value of our portfolio to be either drastically falling or drastically increasing because we have almost immunized our portfolio. The same way, apart from the net worth immunization strategy, we can talk about a target date immunization strategy. So here, this is generally followed by a lot of insurance related plans. So we are talking about a given liability cash flow stream. You construct an asset portfolio of fixed income securities whose duration matches the duration of the liability. So the asset portfolio is constructed in such a way that its duration matches the duration of the liabilities. So whenever a future payment obligation comes up, our asset portfolio will be very much in place to meet the liabilities whenever required. But if the timing and the amount of the liabilities is very uncertain, as in the case of various insurance related claims, this is where creating an asset portfolio where the duration of the assets matches the duration of the liabilities becomes a very massive exercise. So there is a kind of a dedication. The assets are mapped to the liabilities. Cash flows of the assets are matched with each and every component of the liabilities. But the biggest problem is finding assets of such kind of cash flows for such kind of time periods is a very difficult task in the real world.